Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki sat down for a conversation about their shared concerns. As two influential figures in their respective fields, they were eager to delve into the pressing issues plaguing the nation. The tension in the room was palpable as they discussed the entitlement mentality that has taken hold in America, the complex financial situation facing the country, and the need for people to change their thinking about their finances. With decades of experience and a wealth of knowledge between them, their conversation promised to be eye-opening and thought-provoking. But what would they uncover about the state of the nation? And what solutions would they propose to tackle these shared concerns? The answer was about to be revealed in their suspenseful conversation. In this video, the story of our shared concerns, from the best-selling book, Why We Want You to Be Rich, Two Men, One Message, by the great authors Robert Kiyosaki and US President Donald Trump. Get ready to expand your mind, learn valuable lessons, and gain a deeper understanding of the principles that drive successful individuals. You'll not only gain knowledge, but also practical guidance to apply in your own life. Unleash your full potential with a Rich Mind channel, where you'll discover valuable insights and knowledge from renowned authors and speakers from around the world. Whether you're looking to improve your professional skills, achieve success, or build wealth, this channel is dedicated to providing you with the tools and resources you need to reach your goals. Join us on our journey to success and subscribe today. Let's learn and grow together. Our shared concerns. Robert's View, Dallas, Texas, February 19, 2006. The black limo arrived at the backstage entrance of the Learning Annex's Real Estate Expo for the second time on a Sunday afternoon. As soon as people heard the news that the Donald had arrived, the excitement in the air was palpable. The police escort made their way in first, clearing the path for Mr. Trump and forming two lines on either side. Mr. Trump walked through the lines of his adoring fans, who cheered and applauded him. Once the press had left and some time had passed, approximately an hour, Donald approached me and asked about the size of the audience and their reaction. He wanted to know if the crowd was large and enthusiastic, or if they were smaller and more reserved. This showed his dedication to his work and his desire to always put on a great performance for his fans. Tens of thousands of people are here, and they're a fantastic crowd, I responded to Donald's inquiry. People have traveled from all corners of the globe just to be here this weekend. They are eager to learn and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. I too was enthusiastic, but for a different reason. Since our last meeting, I had taken the time to read Donald's book, The America We Deserve. In the book, he tackled many of the challenges that we face both as a nation and as a world, such as terrorism, the national debt, and healthcare. In particular, I was impressed by the chapter on healthcare. Donald's insights and solutions on this critical issue were well thought out and reflected a deep understanding of the problems facing our country. He discussed the need for affordable healthcare for all, the importance of choice and competition in the marketplace, and the role of government in addressing this critical issue. His ideas were bold and innovative, and I was eager to hear more about his plans for the future. The General Accounting Office of the U.S. government presents a negative picture of the Medicare program. Unlike Social Security, the Medicare Hospital Insurance High program has been in a cash deficit since 1992, meaning that the current payroll taxes and other revenues are not enough to pay for the benefits and expenses of the program. This means that Medicare is now drawing more from the Treasury than it is contributing, which is a threshold that Social Security is not expected to reach until 2013. The Medicare program as it exists now is not sustainable from both an economic and fiscal perspective. This is not a new concern, as the Medicare trustees recognized in the 1990s that the program was not sustainable in its current form. As to what politicians are doing about this healthcare monster, he writes, Clinton stared at the beast and blinked. He chose to avoid the hard decisions that will have to be made down the road where, as the GAO points out, they will be much more painful. But let's face it, Clinton is hardly the only politician to duck a tough issue. It will take a new breed of politician to push meaningful reform. It requires a risk-taker with titanium nerves and vision. About long-term healthcare, he says, there's one more aspect of the medical insurance story that is almost totally off the typical radar screen. This one involves long-term care. With the baby boom generation heading toward retirement and their parents already there, this is a huge issue. A few numbers tell the story. The number of elderly will double to 75 million by 2030, and the number of seniors living in nursing homes will increase fivefold. I know the response, doesn't Medicaid pay for nursing homes? This question is often asked by boomers who figure their parents will be covered, as they will when their time comes to book some long-term care. Here's the answer. Medicaid was never meant to be a long-term care provider. And as Senator John Breaux and Representative William Thomas has pointed out, the growing demand for long-term care is pushing Medicaid into bankruptcy. Nearly 1 in 2 Americans will need some type of long-term care, but only 1 in 4 can afford long-term private nursing home care, which now averages $41,000 in $1999 a year. Only 1% of Americans have bought long-term healthcare insurance, so most are hoping to rely on Medicaid. As things are right now, they're in for a major disappointment. After a short initial contribution, Medicaid will drop out of the picture until the patient's resources are spent down to the poverty level. If the patients are your parents, that means everything they've worked for in life will be gone. And that often means one parent is left destitute. It can also create a massive financial burden on families. The boomer who planned to sail around the world on his own boat might find himself selling his car to keep mom or dad in a decent facility. After my first meeting with Donald Trump, I knew that we had come together to write this book in order to share our concerns about the current state of American politics and the need to create more economic opportunities for the American people. After reading The America We Deserve, I was further convinced that our shared goals were to educate Americans and make them richer. I saw that Donald understood the importance of creating jobs, increasing access to education, and providing incentives for business growth. He also wanted to make sure that everyone had access to healthcare, that the government was run effectively, and that the rights of all citizens were respected and protected. I knew that in order to achieve these goals, we had to work together. In the green room, that day in Dallas, I drew the following diagram. You're saying it's $72 trillion in off-balance sheet obligations. Donald asked, who says? 2 economists, I replied. In 1994, Kent Smetters and Jagadish Gokhale spent a considerable amount of time trying to accurately calculate the total amount of debt that the United States government owed to its citizens. After carefully analyzing all of the available data, they concluded that the total amount of debt was over $20 trillion. This was an astronomical figure, and it demonstrated the sheer magnitude of the government's obligations to its people. That's a lot of money, said Donald. That's more money than all the money in all the bond and stock markets in the world, I said. I believe the value of all stocks on the world stock markets as of 2000 was around $36 trillion, and the value of all the bonds on the bond markets of the world was only about $31 trillion. This means that the total amount of money in the world's bond and stock markets is $67 trillion, which is more money than the total debt owed by our country. We owe our people more than all the money in the stock and bond markets combined. It's a staggering amount of money, and it's impossible to pay it back. I knew it was bad, said Donald, but not this bad. We can't pay it. Only if we print more money, which would wipe out the savings of everyone, is one way of dealing with the debt crisis, I said. The problem with this is that it would lead to hyperinflation, and not only would savings be wiped out, but people on fixed incomes would also be devastated. Hyperinflation would cause prices to rise dramatically, and those who are living on fixed incomes wouldn't have the purchasing power to keep up with the rising prices. This would have drastic and devastating effects on the economy and society as a whole, and would not be a viable solution to the debt crisis. And this is not just an American problem, Donald said. While we are discussed in terms of American people and American finances, this problem is being felt around the world. People are living longer and the costs of healthcare and other social services are increasing. So countries from Europe to Asia are concerned about how they are going to be able to provide for the health and welfare of their people. This is leading to an unsustainable level of public debt in many countries, and governments are being forced to make difficult decisions on how to manage this growing burden. Back to history. In 1971, President Nixon took the United States off the gold standard, meaning that the value of the US dollar became dependent on the performance of the economy. This has had a negative impact on savers, as the value of their savings has decreased significantly, and they are left with little left for retirement. This is a similar situation to what happened in Germany in the 1930s, and it is thus important to learn from the past to prevent such a crisis from occurring again in the future. The US experienced a period of high inflation in the 1970s due to factors such as the oil crisis, government spending, and the end of the post-war economic boom. The Federal Reserve took measures to combat inflation, which resulted in the famous Volcker shock of 1979. Back home, the 1930s also brought the Great Depression in the United States, leading to the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president. Roosevelt introduced Social Security in 1935, a program that is still in place today, though the problems it was meant to solve have become even bigger. This is due to the fact that other government programs such as Medicare and Medicaid, which were meant to be solutions, have also become much bigger problems. In the 1930s, the German government had printed so much money that the money nearly lost its value, leading to an economic crisis known as hyperinflation. This caused the value of the German mark to decrease significantly and resulted in people having to carry wheelbarrows of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Hyperinflation had devastating effects on the German economy, leading to a rapid increase in poverty and unemployment. This was one of the factors that contributed to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, as the middle class saw their savings being wiped out. Weimar Republic 1920s. Germany's financial inflation was caused by post-WWI reparation payments and government printing of money. The value of the currency plummeted, and prices skyrocketed, leading to widespread poverty. Zimbabwe 2002. Zimbabwe experienced hyperinflation, with the country's currency becoming nearly worthless. The inflation was caused by a combination of factors such as mismanagement, corruption, and political instability. Argentina. In the 1970s and 1980s, Argentina suffered from high inflation due to various factors including political instability, economic mismanagement, and a huge national debt. France 1720s. France's financial inflation in the 1720s was caused by the government printing large amounts of money to fund wars and other expenses. This led to a rapid increase in prices, and the French currency became nearly worthless. China 1940s. During World War II, the Chinese government printed massive amounts of money to finance the war effort, causing hyperinflation and widespread poverty. Brazil 1980s to 1990s. Brazil experienced a period of high inflation in the 1980s and 1990s due to excessive government spending and money printing. The government attempted several reforms to combat inflation, but it was only after adopting a new currency, the real, that inflation was finally brought under control. Venezuela 2010 seconds. Venezuela has experienced hyperinflation in recent years, with the country's currency losing much of its value. The inflation has been caused by a combination of factors, including a drop in oil prices, political instability, and excessive money printing by the government to fund its spending. What we are concerned about. Donald Trump has pointed out that an entitlement mentality has developed in the United States, in which many people, from the president and senators to the poor and disenfranchised, expect a pension from the government. Although he wishes there was a way to solve the underlying problems of poverty and inequality, he believes that doing so would lead to national bankruptcy. He further questions whether asking the wealthy to pay for everyone would solve the issue in the long term, as there may be other underlying issues that need to be addressed. Ultimately, Trump admits that the situation is complex and suggests that there may not be a simple solution. We want people to let go of the entitlement mentality and become rich so they can solve the problem. Their own problems. Robert Kiyosaki. I agree with Donald, and I want people to let go of the entitlement mentality and become rich so they can solve the problem. Their own problem. Consider the following diagram. This model is a way of understanding the connection between our thoughts and our behavior. This model states that our thoughts drive our actions, and our actions lead to results. By understanding this connection, we can gain insight into how our thoughts influence our behavior and the outcomes of our actions. For example, if you have a negative thought about yourself, such as "I'm not good enough," this thought can lead to a cascade of negative behaviors, such as procrastination or self-doubt. These behaviors, in turn, can lead to negative results, such as missed deadlines or poor performance. On the other hand, if we have positive thoughts about ourselves, such as "I can do this," these thoughts can lead to positive behaviors, such as taking action and persisting in the face of obstacles. These behaviors result in positive outcomes, such as achieving goals and feeling good about ourselves. Thoughts. Our thoughts are our beliefs, attitudes, and mental images about the world and ourselves. They shape our perception and influence our decisions. Actions. Our thoughts lead to actions, which are the physical or verbal expressions of our beliefs. Our actions reflect what we think, feel, and believe. Results. Our actions produce results, which are the outcomes of our choices and behaviors. The results we experience are a direct reflection of our actions and the thoughts that motivated them. In short, the sequence shows that our thoughts shape our actions, and those actions determine the results we experience. By becoming aware of our thoughts and changing them if necessary, we can control the actions we take and the results we produce. The best way to remedy the issue of poor financial results is to shift our mindset and start thinking like wealthy individuals instead of individuals of lower socioeconomic status. This means abandoning the entitlement mentality, regardless of whether one is a military officer, government worker, school teacher, employee, or simply poor. If we do not give up on expecting the government to take care of us, then our nation will continue to suffer from bankruptcy, leaving many well-educated citizens mired in financial destitution. To prevent this from occurring, we must learn to take personal responsibility for our financial standing, seek out the necessary resources to become financially viable, and work to build a better future for ourselves and our nation. Henry Ford is a classic example of how thoughts and actions can impact results. Henry Ford was an inventor and businessman who founded the Ford Motor Company. He revolutionized the automobile industry with his assembly line production methods and made cars affordable for the average person. Before he became successful, Henry Ford struggled with self-doubt and negative thoughts. He had numerous failed businesses and faced many obstacles along the way. However, he refused to let his negative thoughts control him and instead focused on his vision of making automobiles affordable and accessible to everyone. Through his persistence and determination, Henry Ford transformed his thoughts into actions. He believed in himself and his ideas and worked tirelessly to bring his vision to life. The results of his efforts speak for themselves. He became one of the wealthiest and most successful entrepreneurs in history, and his innovations had a profound impact on the automobile industry and society as a whole. Albert Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. In this case, it is my opinion that it is insanity to keep sending kids to school and not teaching them about money. When you look at the cash flow quadrant pictured below, E stands for employee, S stands for small business person, self-employed or specialist, B stands for big business owners such as Donald Trump, I stand for investor. I believe we need to train more kids to be BS entrepreneurs who create jobs, and all kids to be investors in the I quadrant. Today, our schools do a pretty good job educating people to be ES or SS, but hardly any education is allocated to be BS or IS. Instead of walking away with a solid financial education, most kids leave school some already deeply in debt, prepared only to work hard, save money, get out of debt, invest for the long term, and diversify. Warren Buffett says the following about diversification. Diversification is protection against ignorance. It makes very little sense if you know what you are doing. One of the keys to becoming rich is to know what you are doing. Back on stage. 15 minutes, said Bill Zanker to Donald. Okay, he replied. I'm ready. As we headed towards the stage, Donald said, the reason we want people to become wealthy is so that they can solve their own financial issues. Too many people are relying on the stock market, the government, or a pension to be the solution. That's a great starting point, I commented. Let's explain why we got rich, not how, and why we continue working even though we already have enough money. We want people to discover their own reasons for wanting wealth, rather than expecting a handout from the government. That's how we can help solve the problem. Obviously, we can't help everyone, since not everyone has the ability or the desire to become wealthy, but we can aid those who have both. This entitlement mindset is a major problem, said Donald. Huge, I agreed. Bigger even than the national debt, the weakening dollar, the energy crisis, and retirement programs. And those are really huge and very real issues, Donald added. The problem isn't the money, I said. We all have financial issues. Even you and I, it's how we solve the problem that's the real issue. Exactly right, said Donald. As a nation, we can't solve our financial problems if we continue to have a sense of entitlement. This mentality is what is truly at the core of the problem. That's why we want people to become affluent. As I began to ascend the stage stairs to prepare myself to introduce Donald, I said, our financial issues are caused by the way we think. We need to alter the way we think about money. With that, I went up on stage to introduce Donald Trump to thousands of admirers and students. Donald's view, groupthink. As Robert states, we cannot resolve a significant financial crisis without dated thinking. I completely agree. This sense of entitlement is widespread and has become a major issue in our economy. The term groupthink is commonly used to describe this herd mentality where people conform to the opinions and decisions of the group, without considering their own thoughts and opinions. In this scenario, it's often the wolves that lead the group instead of the shepherd. Our aim is to break this groupthink and encourage people to think for themselves, especially when it comes to their finances. People who are capable of independent thought will rarely follow the herd. While we focus on the groupthink that stops people from taking control of their finances and blindly trusting financial advisors, it brings to mind another story. For my radio program on Clear Channel, I talked about Object Orange. This story is not about the Gates Project by Jean-Claude and Christo in Central Park, but something happening in Detroit, Michigan. Detroit has many abandoned homes due to the city losing nearly 1 million people in the last 50 years. Frustrated with the sight of the dilapidated homes, a group of artists took matters into their own hands. To bring attention to the issue, they secretly painted the buildings bright orange overnight. The bright orange buildings were hard to miss, and as a result, several of them have since been demolished. The artists' goal all along. The artists behind the Object Orange project in Detroit, Michigan, have decided to remain anonymous due to the potential consequences of trespassing. Despite this, they hope their actions will inspire others to join their cause of bringing attention to abandoned and dilapidated buildings in the city. Their unconventional approach, which involves secretly painting the buildings bright orange overnight, has already led to some positive results as several of the homes have since been torn down. The project serves as a reminder that individuals have the power to take action and make a difference, rather than simply waiting for someone else to solve the problem. This type of out-of-the-box thinking should not be limited to just artists, but should be embraced by all. The speakers in this passage emphasize the importance of avoiding passiveness and complacency in both personal and national matters. They urge individuals to expand their thinking when it comes to their finances and futures, and to not succumb to the big groupthink mentality. They believe that in order to thrive, it is necessary to constantly challenge and push one's own boundaries. The message is ultimately to think bigger and to be aware of the challenges ahead in order to remain successful and stay ahead of the curve. People who are capable of thinking for themselves rarely be part of any herd. Donald Trump. The next video, the shrinking middle class.